Uh-oh, it's being recorded.
Uh-oh. All right.
Does this mean that I have to like watch what I say?
I already prepped the Kentucky. I already prepped actually both, I think all offices that we just went over the culture and action sheet. And I prepped them that all but number 8, speaking without profanity, would be followed today.
Yeah, guilty as charged.
All right, you guys.
I have so many of these today. I'm doing. Working with Adam is like a whole new beast. It is interesting. It's fun.
Yes, I'm going to ask you about that. So, but not yet. Not yet,
Yeah.
though. Okay, so I don't know if I'm going to let Eric tell you about himself yet. Eric is a dear friend of mine, and he has an incredible story from when he got into real estate until today. And I'm going to start by having him walk you guys through his journey a little bit. It's an incredible story. And whether you are a brand new agent or you are the top agent, what he has to say is going to resonate with you. So I'm excited for him to be able to share with you. So Eric, do you want to start with like Sherwin-Williams and kind of walk him walk him through?
Yeah. So I in 2000. So basically, I'll try to keep it concise since you don't need to know my entire life story, I guess. But I went to college at Indiana State on a radio and TV scholarship. I thought forever that I would be a play-by-play broadcaster, and I was gonna do sports. Worked in TV news right out of college, and then decided that I wanted to move back to Indiana and live in Indiana, which is where everybody that I know is from. And so I thought, you know what, I talk to people for a living on the radio, so I could probably do sales. And so the first place to hire me was Sherwin-Williams. I knew nothing about construction, nothing about paint, and took the job, went through their training program. The good news is that I learned everything about business and everything about sales that I know now came from the training program at Sherwin-Williams. And what I found was that my customers made more money than I did flipping houses. And so I thought, well, hey, a lot of these guys don't have GEDs or any good business practices, and they're making what I'm making a year in 30 days or something. So I thought, well, I'll be a dumb, arrogant 25-year-old and I'll buy a house and flip it. It was 2009, so you can imagine that flopped. And so I ended up owning it for 3 years before I sold it. And at that point in time, though, I had become addicted to real estate and the idea that I could stop selling paint by flipping houses. And so my intent was to flip 4 houses a year and never sell real estate and never have to sell paint. And then I accidentally made a before and after post on Facebook of a property that I flipped in 2014, and I had a fraternity brother of mine reach out about staging of all things. He said, "Hey, who stages your house or your houses?" And I said, "Well, I do, because apparently I was metro enough to be fantastic at staging." And so I asked the follow-up question, which was, "Well, why do you ask?" And he said, "Well, we're going to sell our house." And so I thought, well, I've got this real estate license. I might as well sign up for the job. And so I worked with that client, my fraternity brother, who was my first client. And I realized that all I needed was 2 closings to make as much money as I could flipping houses. Screw this investing, a couple $100,000 into flipping and all this time and all this labor. I'll just find more people like Greg and Rebecca, and I'll just sell real estate. And so that became my obsession. And 2 years later, I was asked to no longer sell paint at Sherwin-Williams. That last year, my paycheck was $39,000. The next year in real estate, I brought home $808,000 in GCI as an individual agent on 128 closings. And
hold on, time out.
Yeah.
So 39,000 to 800,000 GCI is what in 1 year?
Yeah, it was. It's interesting because I think about that too, and I was too scared to quit selling paint in order to go full time into real estate. Despite that, I was working full time selling paint and then full time selling real estate. And I think that my GCI that year, the last year I was selling paint, I think it was like 430, 435, something in that range, but I was still too scared to death to walk away from my guaranteed income.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I say that I was asked to no longer come back. I'm actually unemployable at this point, I've decided. And so they asked me not to be an employee there anymore, which was okay at that point. So then I went all in on selling. And so that year, yeah, it was 808. And, you know, it's a huge culture shock to go from 39,000 to a lot more. And so I was scared to spend money. You know, I didn't know, like, did I get lucky?
Mm-hmm.
Did this just happen one time? Is this just a lightning strike? Or, you know, could I spend some of this? Is this a pattern? And so I went and I studied the last 20 years of the real estate board and the rankings. And what I found was that consistently the top 50 to 100 names 20 years ago are still pretty well in that top 50 to 100, unless they were selling REOs or foreclosures. So what I put two and two together on was that I didn't just get lucky. I likely was employing a lot of the same practices. And as long as I didn't quit doing the right things, I could pretty well maintain that position, I believe, for the foreseeable future.
Hey, Eric, if you had to pinpoint one or two things that you did in that first year, because, you know, we know that 6 out of 10 brand new agents get out of business in the first year of getting their license. If you had to pinpoint one or two things that you did to have the success that you had, what would those be that first year?
You know, one of them is obsession. Like, I think that you have to be passionate about what you're doing. And I'm honestly like, if I do something, it is, it's extreme. And I'm like really too far over the line sometimes on the healthy obsession part of things. You know, like the example is, I don't know too many agents that go and study 20 years of real estate trends to figure out who are the agents 20 years ago that were selling the most homes in the market. And, you know, I stayed home from a bachelor party that I was in the wedding for one weekend because I had a lead call for a $1.2 million buyer. And at the time, I didn't know who lived in $1 million houses because this was 2014. And so $1 million was much different in 2014 than it is today. I didn't know who lived in $1 million houses. And so I didn't know what they drove. I didn't know what they thought, what they did for a living, how they acted. I was not prepared, and I was not confident that I could handle that appointment. And so I stayed home from a bachelor party, and I wrote reports on every single on every single neighborhood that adjoined this lake community where they wanted to buy a home. And so I wrote reports on each neighborhood, like how many homes were in the neighborhood, what was their average price, who were the builders, what year were they built, what amenities they have, what's the historical pricing trends of it. I studied 15 years of every single sale in that market so that when I showed up, I could know confidently how to help that particular consumer. And funny enough, they actually have still, to this day, I check the tax records all the time, they've not bought anything. And for like 6 weeks, I showed them houses in that $1 million to $1.5 million price range. For 6 weeks, I showed them houses every weekend, and they've still not bought. And yet I earned one hell of an income and one hell of an education by going through that activity every single week to learn what I didn't know and to be obsessive about it. And so I think you have to understand that, like, being successful and doing something at a high level means that you have to be willing to play all out. Like it means whatever, that there's a cost, there's a sacrifice you have to make towards being successful. Unless you're just naturally a lot more intelligent than I am and a lot more gifted and you have pretty hair like Dana. The rest of us have to try hard. And so I had to be obsessed. And then, you know, probably the other one is that just talk to people. People will talk about real estate. It is so easy to talk about what we do. You know, everybody lives somewhere, and therefore there's always an easy discussion to have around real estate. It's like pizza and sex. Everyone loves it. And only two of those they'll talk about publicly oftentimes. So, you know, pizza and real estate should be pretty easy conversations for you to have. I think it's just easiest thing on earth to talk about. If you're a renter, awesome. Let's talk about your apartment complex. If you live in a house, let's talk about it. If you own a lot of houses, cool. Let's talk about that. It's just a simple topic to discuss. We picked one of the easiest businesses in America to be in.
Do you, Eric, do you think that you truly did have to sacrifice some things that first year?
I still sacrifice things. I don't think
That's what I was
stops.
hoping you would say. That's what I thought you would say.
I don't think that stops. You know, I think that that's one of the misnomers of just, I mean, I'm going to go on this old man rant that, you know, as an old 37-year-old, I guess, but I think that's one of the challenges, one of the lies that we've all been sold is that is that life is supposed to be happy and easy, right? And that we get things without sacrifice. The reality, I think, is that happiness is a moment. Peace and joy are two totally different things. They're not happiness though, right? And so we get happiness in moments in life that we're present in, and hard things take hard work.
Yeah.
If everyone could do this, it wouldn't take a sacrifice. It's just, where are we going to allocate our time? Like, how do we prioritize what's most important to us? I don't prioritize watching the 20th season of the Kardashians, but I do prioritize knowing the market and studying other people in the industry.
Eric, I just finished our monthly office meeting in the Richmond and the Kentucky office. And one of the things that I shared with them was that we had a panel last week in Columbus with 4 top agents on it. And my biggest takeaway was every single one of them were a local economist. They know every number that's happening in their farm, at their board. Every morning they look at it. And Gary has been telling us that for the last at least 2 or 3 years. Not only do you need to have the relationships, but you need to become a local economist. And you were doing that back that first year, but just by studying the numbers and knowing the trends and all those things. And I think sometimes agents forget how important that is, especially now.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the traps that I see agents fall into right now is believing that the market is crazy or bad or that it's different. And the fallacy in believing right now that sellers are hard to find is one of the biggest traps that I see agents fall in. Because if we believe that the market is different or harder or crazy or somehow negative, then what we don't understand is mathematics. And that's because we actually are seeing more sellers now than we have in the last 15 years. And so if 6 million homes seasonally adjusted are going to sell, someone is finding those sellers. The question is just going to be, am I willing to do the activity that's required to figure out who is selling and how to find that person? Or am I going to stick with my narrative about sellers are hard to find and the market is crazy, the market is bad, it's hard to get offers accepted. The stories that we tell ourselves about the market don't add up to the mathematics. But when you know the math of the market, it makes your mindset so much easier to adapt and then to educate the consumer. Because how do you put a value on wealth and education to the consumer? You know, I think about the fact that we're in this industry where idiots and experts get paid the same amount. And that is mind-blowing to me. Can you imagine paying a world-class cardiologist to do a triple bypass the same amount that you pay the cardiologist you hire from the Minute Clinic? It makes no sense. And yet real estate agents, somehow we've decided that 3% is 3%. And so I don't exactly go along with that narrative because that doesn't make a whole lot of rational sense to me. And so I think that my job is to add way more value than I charge, but my expense shouldn't be the same thing as what every other real estate agent in the board charges, because I should be bringing more value from a financial wealth building perspective.
Okay, so you just walked right into one of the very first questions that I had, which is something that a lot of agents want to talk about, and that is, how are you getting listings? How are you getting offers accepted, and the commission reduction trends that we're seeing? So anything on all 3 of those?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting that NAR puts out that like 164 page buyer and seller profile that I am such a loser on that I went through this weekend. You know, it's interesting to me because when we look at the data, we're able to figure out where to target our efforts. Like we make this job more difficult than it truly is. 43% of sellers right now are boomers. So if you're looking for sellers, what you shouldn't be doing is prospecting your millennial Facebook account, because the math tells me that that's not where you're finding sellers. 43% of sellers right now are boomers. The number one thing that boomers say they want when they sell is to move closer to family and friends. Okay, so that doesn't really tell me a lot, although it does tell me that they're willing to move further than 15 miles, which is the average distance that sellers right now are moving. Okay, so I know that boomers, as a result of looking at the data that's available, are moving first and foremost to be closer to friends and relatives. And then secondly, they're moving because they say they want less space. The reality, though, is that their purchasing behaviors don't line up with their motivation, because they're buying houses that are less than 100 square feet smaller than the home they're selling. So despite the fact that boomers are telling people that they're moving to downsize, they're not actually downsizing. They're resizing. The configuration of the house is what's changing, not the size itself. And so when I know where to find sellers, I can change my messaging and change my target demographics with how we're going to go do that. So let's say that that's the demographic I'm going after. I need to figure out what's the most important message to that demographic. Well, what I know is that based on all the data is that boomers want to have confidence in reputation and experience. The number one thing that those 66 and older are seeking in a real estate agent is they're placing a premium on their experience and on their trustworthiness. Okay, so then my messaging has to be centered around what that demographic is seeking in a real estate agent. That's different than Gen Z, who happens to lead all other generations in the number of agents being hired based on referral. In fact, Gen Z, oddly enough, for those that they said would only ever plant their nose in an iPad, they're using mouth-to-mouth, word-of-mouth referrals more than any other generation. I think you're on mute, sorry.
Oh, I am on mute, sorry. Well, just a side note on that. So if someone is writing these down, which they should be, and they're thinking, where is he getting this stuff from? Okay, in order to be the local economist that you are, and even the industry economist, where are some of the places that you go to find your data?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, and I will tell you that there's a lot of days the answer is I don't know. So, you know, right now I'm doing a Monday market report every Monday at noon to go through data on either economics, the real estate industry. You know, right now I'm doing a training at 2 o'clock about seasonally adjusted real estate trends and what changes real estate agents should make on adjusting their lead gen activities for the seasonality of the market. A lot of the seasonality data that I'm pulling for this one is on like Market Watch or obviously Inman.
Yeah.
Notorious Rob is decent for real estate stuff. Housing Wire. Real Trends have, gosh, what is that owner's name?
Steve Murray.
Yeah, Steve Murray has data that he puts out regularly.
His is a good one because it's usually very factual.
Yeah.
That's good. I was just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, if you want to like super nerd out on the economy part of it, I mean, or some of the housing related, National Association of Home Builders, the Remodelers Index.
NAR is a semi.
NAR has good stuff. Yeah, that's the one thing NAR has done really well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Sorry to interrupt. I just know that somebody out there is wondering where you got all your stats.
Yeah. So I think you have to understand the trends, right? You have to look at what are the demographics for those that are moving, and what are trends in the marketplace. Like I know in our market in Indianapolis that we have the lowest days on market nationally. At 4 days on market is the average. So national average 17, Indianapolis 4. Well, that's odd. No wonder my agents are burnout.
Yeah.
And so okay, that we're an outlier. The question then has to be is why are we an outlier? Well, what we know is that there's a huge amount of investor demand in our marketplace. You know, we have 5 hedge funds that are buying and buy 16% of the market, which means maybe the message in our market needs to be so much different than the message in other markets, because it needs to be tailored on competing against hedge funds by offering cash offers. And does that generate us more seller activity? So it's understanding like where are the trends and who is selling, and then how do you go find them. Also, I mean, gosh, Dana, there's some things that we found just by looking at like the trends over the last few years to see, okay, if every year 10 to 12% of our closings are based on sign calls, can we identify a pattern in sign calls that generates us more closings than others? And what we found was that homes with pools get disproportionately more sign calls. So, okay, let's go door knock houses with pools and take them even if they're overpriced.
Wow.
Because there's a high probability that we will sell them. And if we aren't able to sell them, that we'll at least generate a disproportionate amount of sign calls for houses with pools compared to everything else that we list. And so like going in your business and looking at trends, not looking at anecdotes. Like the stories cause us to be distracted and think that because one consumer or 2 consumers had a certain behavior, that's what the aggregate looks like. The reality though is that rarely is the case until you can identify more and more patterns and trends. And that's where I think being the economist of choice helps a ton. And it's a big undertaking. So if you don't want to do it and you don't want to take your Saturday to read 164 pages of the NAR report, find someone who's doing it and distilling it. I think that's the beauty of Keller Williams. It's the beauty of the fact that there's so many people who enjoy doing that you can siphon that information and knowledge from.
Yeah. You said, why all your agents are burnt out. I feel like that's been a hot topic lately. And I've spoken with so many agents. One agent in particular, I think wrote 50 something offers the first 2 quarters of the year, and 4 got under contract. So how are you guys how are you specifically, especially with the agents on your team, dealing with the burnout? Or the buyer fatigue that a lot of agents are feeling?
Yeah, that part is tough. One thing is I think that part of it starts from mindset.
Yeah.
When we tell ourselves that the market is crazy and the market is chaotic and that we don't stand a chance of winning, or that every transaction is going to be a fight, then what we end up creating is this self-fulfilling prophecy. And so one of the things that we've enacted around here is we have younger agents. All of our agents are, except for Tom, he's old, but all of our agents are under like 35. And so they lack some grit and some life experience. And one thing I've enacted with them is that there will be no negative talk about other agents. Like, I don't care how unprofessional or how many times the other agent calls you to get an answer, or how much pressure they put on you to have their offer accepted. If you're going to speak of them it will be that agent is broken, and we're all broken. And because we're all broken, that agent may not know what we know, and therefore doesn't act the same way that we act from a professionalism standpoint. And so the mindset is not that person is whatever negative label that we try to project onto them. They're broken just like the rest of us. And therefore we can meet them where they are to try to actually help them through this process. Because if we don't, the realtor on realtor crime is like at an all-time high. You know, the number of complaints that we see at the real estate board is at a record level, and it's ridiculous. It is 100% preventable. There is no QAnon for real estate. There is not this conspiracy that that agents are mean deals off market because no other agent writes good offers, or because you know, you've got grudges against you. Those things might be true in isolated instances, but in the macro, it's not the case. And the more that we allow our mindset to be consumed with the negativity of the market, the more we lose. It's just, it becomes a self-fulfilling narrative.
Yeah, totally agree. Are you guys doing anything different to win multiple offers?
We're pretty gangster, honestly. We will get real gangster. So yeah, we are. I think for multiple offers, there's a lot of different things that you can do. So for us, you know, this has been a controversial topic, and one that you may know of. I think the first introduction to me at the region was when someone tattled on me and said that I had made some inappropriate comments at a presentation, and that probably happened, but it wasn't in this case. What I was accused of saying at the time, you know, there were a couple of agents in the Indy Market Center that quit one time from as a result of a training that I did in 2019, and that training was about how to win multiple offers every time. And two agents were so appalled by the ideas that we suggested for winning multiple offers every time that they literally left Keller Williams altogether. And the idea that I had at that time was that you would write offers as is, and then you would waive inspection. And two years ago, that was so maddening, unethical.
I remember that, honestly.
Yeah, it walked away. And so I say that because what worked then and was determined to be unethical by those agents at the time, which now come to find out is widely accepted by every other real estate agent across every board in America at this point, is that we as real estate agents operate from the most insane and archaic set of unwritten rules. And we are bound to this box that our thinking has been packaged in. And the reality is that we're getting beat by wholesalers who've decided that there's a different way to do real estate. We're getting beat by iBuyers who've decided there's a different way to sell real estate. And we have a choice to make, which is we'll accept the box that our thinking came in from unwritten rules of how it was done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or we can adapt. And so we've really put pressure on our agents of understanding what the job of a real estate agent is, and not injecting my perspective and my beliefs onto the consumer. And so let me give a better example of that. The other day, we had an agent who on the team came to me and he said, hey, what do I do with this situation? We've got this inspection and it's not going well, and this buyer wants to back out. And my first question to him was not about the inspection, right? Because I actually don't care about the inspection. I don't think that's the root cause of the problem, or it's certainly not how we're going to solve it. And so I said, Alec, why does this buyer want to move? Well, they're renting right now. Okay, so what is it about renting that's causing them pain that they're trying to solve by moving? Right? Is we know that everyone has a problem, a pain point that they're trying to solve by moving away or towards something. And so I said, Alec, what is it that okay, they're renting, but that's not good enough. What is renting causing them from a pain point in their life? Well, the situation is one in which the mom doesn't feel like the daughter's in a good living situation environmentally, and so they want to get away from that. Okay, tell me more about that. What does that mean? What is not a good situation? Well, I guess like the neighbor sells drugs and they can like smell smoke, not cigarette smoke on their apartment walls, and she doesn't exactly want to raise her 8-year-old there. Okay, got it. So then, now we have something to work with, because I don't get to play God in this transaction. I don't get to decide what the 8-year-old daughter's safety and future environment is worth to that particular consumer, to tell them whether or not they should waive an appraisal, waive an inspection, proceed with whatever electrical challenges are there. I don't get to put a price on the value of the environment and the future of the daughter by telling the consumer how they should do it based on my belief system and based on how real estate has operated before. And so my role changes as a real estate agent in this market, because what I get to do is I get to ask people better questions. I get to ask people questions about, well, here's what we know, Mrs. Buyer, is that if you stay in your current situation in your apartment, your neighbor will continue to sell drugs and your daughter will be exposed to that indefinitely. Now, what we know about the other house is there's some electrical problems. So it sounds like both of your environments or potential environments have problems. Which one would you feel more comfortable with? With the electrical problems. We know how to solve the electrical problems. We don't know how to solve the my neighbor sells crack problem. And so the beauty of the market that we're in right now is all we have to do is get better at helping people work through what's holding them back and what problems they're trying to solve by moving. And so that's the fun part, because you actually get to serve people. And that's like the infinite game of real estate, is you show up and serve people. You don't sell them something, you just serve them the entire time. And it's so easy. Like, I think, I was just doing a training and I was saying, Dana, that like, I think about how can I not lead generate? Because there is a 3-year-old right now in a situation, and I have a 3-year-old, and there's a 3-year-old in a situation, I'm sure, in an environment that his parents don't know what I know. They don't know that they have equity in their home and that they could sell their house, cash out the equity, and provide a better environment for that child. And so if I don't do my job, I'm selfish, because if I do my job and prospect and educate, then those parents can create a better environment for that 3-year-old. And so I think about what I want for my son, and it looks totally different than what situation a lot of people are in. And it's just so easy to want to actually show up and serve people when you have the really clear conviction of the fact that we're in an industry that is really, really fortunate that we actually just help people all day. But we don't have to look at blood and gross things like that. We just actually get to show up and help people. I mean, it's the same thing that you and I do, when we think about coaching and helping agents too, right? It's like, I hope that with our time together today, that Blair ends up taking something away, and that changes the trajectory of her business, and that then creates more opportunity for her family, for her friends, and that she's able to pass that on to someone else, right? And that's a totally different level of energy. I don't have to show up prepared and inauthentic if I'm showing up to serve the time together. And when we do that with consumers, it's so easy to go out and do our job, regardless of what the market looks like, because we can't be attached to the outcome, right? Like, I'm not attached to whether Blair takes value from our conversation together. I hope that you do, but I'm not attached to it. And so I won't stay up and lose sleep over it the same way I wouldn't lose sleep over if one of my clients doesn't choose to take my advice or rejects me, because I'm not attached to the outcome. I'm just attached to serving them. That's all. What to do when a seller wants to overprice their house in the market? Wow, this is interesting, because I screwed this one up the other day. Can I tell you about how I cost myself a listing the other day? I don't go on many appointments anymore. I probably sell, I don't know, 2 houses a month or something now. I'm a little bit busy, but
he means him personally, not his team.
Personally, yeah. I personally don't go on a lot of appointments, listing appointments anymore. But I got a really good referral source, and a good friend of mine, she referred me to some friends, and so I went on this listing presentation or this listing appointment, and I walk in, and half the walls are painted, but they like started to paint and then they stopped, kind of like what it would look like if I picked up a brush again to paint. And they realized it was miserable, so they quit halfway through. And like every single window in the house was rotted. Most of the wood trim was rotted and needed to be replaced. And they bought this house a year ago and they were relocating for his work. They got a brand new agent, first ever transaction. They met this guy at an open house. And he, said, this is a great house, buy this one. It needed $50,000 in wood rot and window repair. And I didn't think they had any equity in it because of that. And I believe that I was doing them a better service to let them down up front than to let them down later. And so I said, I believe this is what your house is worth. I believe it's worth $395. You paid $380 for it. And you have realtor fees, and you're probably going to get hammered on an inspection. We might get lucky because of the market. We may benefit from it, but I still think they're going to probably want your wood rot and windows replaced. And so I advised them on that $395, let them know what the market looked like. They ignored my phone calls and hired the agent who helped them buy the house to start with, who gave them no service and no advice, or at least that was my perspective. The home just sold one day on market for $445, $50,000 more than I recommended.
Wow.
So what I'm going to challenge you on is who is actually the expert on what the price is in the market, you or the consumer? Is who's right? The person who's writing the check or the person who's telling them what to write the check for?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to decide in this market, will you take the listing, or will you decide that you are the expert on what market demand and what value looks like? Because the reality is there's a lot of appraisers using mathematics and calculators and a lot of really broken spreadsheets that none of them seem to align any of their appraisal values. And so if real estate were actually a mathematics and science industry, our appraisers would be a hell of a lot more accurate on value. Yeah. And the reality is the consumer is actually the one that defines the price. The appraiser is the one that looks back 6 months ago to tell you that you're wrong. And so as a real estate agent, you've got a really tough position right now to be in, is, how do you price property? How do you make peace with the prices of property the way they are right now? The easiest way to make peace with prices right now is to look at the data and believe that you know what the future looks like to some degree of certainty. And so I think if you're ever going to let someone if you're ever going to have a seller overprice something, now's the time to do it. Just set expectations, though, that it might sit on the market. And if we get feedback that says that it's overpriced, we'll know within this many days. We'll call every Friday. We'll talk about the market. We'll talk about what the feedback looks like. And then we can discuss what your next steps are. But Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, tell me again, what's the reason that you're moving? And what pain are you trying to fix by putting your home up for sale? You're just always going to take it back to the motivation and have transparent conversations.
Eric, I think that's so good. You just made me think. So we have a friend, he actually has spoken. I've interviewed him on Zoom. I guess it was maybe earlier this year. His name is Caleb. He is a huge agent in Charleston, and he's been very blessed. He's young. He's had a great career. He and his wife, Ashley, they built a new construction house in a pretty great part of Mount Pleasant in Charleston 3 years ago, and they were in like $1.1 million in it. The market there right now is really fantastic. Well, depending on which way you want to look at it.
Yeah.
And stuff is selling it's nuts. So 3 years ago, built it for 1.1. They have put in a pool, and it's a pretty sharp pool. However, they decided he came across another lot that he got a really, really great deal on, and he knew he had some great equity in his house. So he said, I think it's worth 2, but I'm going to list it at 2.5. So 3 years later, they listed it 3 weeks ago at 2.5 million. And he said, honestly, I don't know if I'm going to get that, but I'm going to try it. And if it doesn't work, or if I get the feedback that it's overpriced, I'll drop it. So he had 2 weeks of showings. which stuff is selling, you know, in a day there.
Yeah.
He had 2 weeks of showings. 3 people said, we love it. They just think that it's a little too high. So he ended up dropping it to 250, I believe, just like within the last week or so. And I think that it's sold. So the thing is, you just never know, honestly. And sometimes I kind of think people are, let them try, because right now, who knows? And someone comes and pays cash and they don't care about appraisal. You know, in this market, he might find a buyer that's willing to, he likely will find a buyer that's willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, this is what's interesting too, is, you know, one of the things we have to remember as real estate agents, and it's one of the things I see agents struggle with a lot, is like our attachment to our ego, right? Our attachment to our own identity and how other people see us. Like, okay, so if your seller prices a property too high, how does that impact you? Like, who put it in the chat that about it being overpriced? I forget.
Well, it came from, we have a whole room of people watching, and so it came from one of them.
Okay. All right, you're good. Yeah, so that's the thing I think about though, is like, so what? What's actually at risk? The only thing that's at risk is my own ego, truly. Like, I could invest time in it, and I could invest money in it, and I could have an asshole seller. But if that's the case, just stop. Just if they're not someone you want to work with, don't work with them. Go work with someone else. Find one of the other 6 million sellers. But don't work with that person. But otherwise, it's our ego that holds us back.
Yeah. Was somebody in the room gonna ask something?
It's Teresa, Dana. Can you hear me?
Hi, Teresa. Yep, I can hear you loud and clear.
Eric, the reason I was asking is because it's so nice when you price it a little bit lower and get that bidding war, and you can waive the inspection and the appraisal. I feel like if I don't get that for my client now, that I'm not giving them the best value. And so, I mean, and yeah, so that is a little bit of ego, because I don't want to look like the agent that, hey, she priced it too high and didn't do the best job for her client in this very fun market.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part. Thank you for recognizing that too. I mean, that's the challenge that we all have in this industry, right? It's like, we want to look good to our clients, right? We want to look like we've done what they've paid us for. And so I think the easiest way to lose that attachment of looking good, or to appear that we've done what we've been paid for, is to have given the consumer the opportunity to be educated and then make a choice, and then detaching from whatever choice they make. And that's easier said than done, I realize, but like, that habit of it makes it a lot easier. And that's the reason I was willing to walk away from that listing, was because I didn't believe that I could actually serve them the way that was in their best interest. And so I wanted to give them the choice.
And I actually made a chart that shows them, like, hey, if you take my price, here's what might happen. And if we list it a little too high, here's what might happen. And of course, I biased it to make it look like it was more rainbows and unicorns if you took my price.
Okay. Were you able to fulfill what you intended?
One time yes, and one time no. So I'm about to list something that I had another agent go through last night who said, yeah, I think it's about 20,000 overpriced.
Okay. You know, you've got to look a little bit at the data right now too, that tells you we're starting to adjust, right? We're expecting 50,000 more active properties nationally by the end of August. So basically a small amount of like inventory rise compared to where we are now. So I do think we'll see prices plateau. And so you're probably not going to get the same level of demand unless you have one of those unicorn properties. However, I think if the seller will wait long enough, their property will continue to go up to whatever the market will meet them wherever they're pricing it. I mean, the reality is, I think that barring some everything bubble, we're all in this real estate market for a very, very, very long time. So y'all better just get used to the fact that it's going to be multiple offers on a regular basis.
So Eric,
the sellers, the better.
Eric, I was actually just getting ready to moving into my next question was what do you foresee? What do you think about the future market? I mean, I know that you are now very close with Adam Hergenrother, who's a top 5 team inside of Keller Williams. What are you guys, we hear from Gary and we get to learn from Gary. What's your personal perspective on it?
Yeah, I think we're, yeah, we can talk about that, but we recently made a big move and a big change for us. It's exciting too. So, I picked up really like a director of industry role with Adam. So a lot of what I'm doing is market-based. It's, future forecasting for industry, being an agent advocate, looking at, where are the trends going in the real estate market and in the economy. How can we make adjustments to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis in order to increase the per agent production for the organization? And so now I'm kind of nerding out on all of this. I like Harvard Business School indicates that we're 2.5 million houses short as a country, and that based on the current population trends and the number of millennials and Gen Zs and the rate of household formation due to marriages being at an all-time low, that we could potentially be at a housing shortage until 2045. And barring some sort of evolution in technology or in construction, I think we're looking at that as well. Because the reality is that construction is one of the worst industries in America. There's probably nothing more outdated and antiquated than construction. When was the last time something innovative happened in construction? The 2x4? Like, why are we still building houses out of like wood in a wet, dirty field with people and hammers and nail guns? It makes no sense to me. Does anyone realize how much better there is innovation-wise and automation-wise for construction? And yet the reality is our psychology says that we need 2x4 construction. And so because of that, we can't get affordable housing. And the fact that affordable housing is at such a shortage, and debt-backed assets continue to go up at meteoric rates, means that there's a huge deficit that we are probably in for a multi-decade trend at this point. I mean, we're down to less than 400,000 houses for a country with 330 million people. And our population keeps growing, and the psychology is not working like what a lot of experts thought it would. Like, people thought that Gen Z and millennials wouldn't want to own homes. It's just not true. It's not true at all. And the reality is that people want to own homes today the same way that they did 30 years ago. The problem is that they're saddled with more student loan debt than ever. In fact, the most educated generation on the planet right now is 31 to 40. It's also the poorest generation of the last 100 years. And so as a result of that, we will likely see a housing shortage for at least the next 2 decades, and until something can be done for affordable housing and some sort of innovation in the construction industry. Like, I'm amazed at construction.
I have to tell you, I'm laughing because I'm sitting here next to Heather, and her husband's the #1 salesman for 84 Lumber in the country. So we're dying over here right now. She said, "Easy, Eric. Hold on, easy on the 2x4s."
That's right. I mean, seriously, why are we still? I don't understand. Why are we still building houses with lumber? It's odd. Like, we could manufacture them off-site.
It's crazy what a lot of people do in Charleston right now. I've been amazed to watch it. I mean, they are picking up these houses and they're literally moving these whole houses to other lots, and then they're raising them and lifting. Like, it's mind blowing what all is happening. It's crazy.
Construction cost. So how, I think it's interesting because If you want to take away something to do to generate more buyers and sellers, look at some of the trends right now. Google search trends show there's been almost a 4-digit increase, almost like 1,000 to 2,000% increase in consumer search behavior on 2021 real estate bubble or 2021 foreclosure crisis or anything that has to do with a real estate bubble or foreclosures has this meteoric rise in consumer search traffic online. Go make a video about what you think the market looks like and educate your database on the market, because now more than ever, people are curious what the market looks like from a future casting perspective. And we're also seeing a huge increase in consumer search traffic for real estate attorneys, escalation clauses, and I think there's one other one, but capital gains tax is a popular real estate search related topic as well. Go make videos for those topics and send them out to your database to educate your consumer and to generate leads. Because that's
a great idea. Yeah, that's a really great idea. Okay, we have 3 minutes left. I know we have a couple of questions we haven't gotten to yet. However, your success has been so great, Eric. And one, I think it's because you have a servant's heart and you love people. And that I think I always tell people, if you don't have that in the real estate industry, then just get out, because it's not gonna work. You have to have that. But two, you're so learning based and you're so growth minded. And I have watched you for the last several years, pour yourself into, you're constantly learning and you're constantly doing research and you're constantly doing all of those things. I have so many questions I want to ask you that we didn't get to yet. A couple of last ones. What advice would you give somebody who is at a ceiling? They just, whether they're newer at a ceiling or whether it's, we've got some of the top teams in our market centers on watching you, whether they're a top team and they're at a ceiling or they're a newer agent breaking through ceilings. And then my second question is, in 2 minutes, what do you do to learn and stay so growth minded?
So on the ceiling side of things, it's so cliche, and honestly, it is super cliche. But one of the first things that comes to mind is people. I think the second one is to figure out from like a needs analysis or a gap analysis with yourself. Like, get really clear. Are you missing education? Are you missing learning something that you don't know that's holding you back to get through that ceiling? Or are you missing someone? Are you missing a person or persons that are holding you back? And here's the thing about it too, is you have to also be willing to give yourself grace, because this business is hard when it comes to business building. Being a real estate agent is simple when you understand it's serving. Building a business is much more complicated and challenging than selling real estate is, because there are things that the best business plan on earth can't prepare you for. Like, let me just give a perspective on it. I had 6 people get pregnant in one calendar year that were out on maternity leave. We had our operations director, her 1-year-old son died on New Year's Day. Our listing coordinator came home to find her husband dead on his couch. We didn't plan for any of those things. None of them. There wasn't a business plan on earth that prepares a small business to have 6 people on maternity leave and 2 deaths in their close family, all within a really short period of time. And so sometimes you have to ask yourself if you want to actually build it and do it. Are you so passionate about it, and will you run through the brick wall and beat your head against the wall over and over and over until you break through the ceiling because you're so on fire passionate for it? Or would it make more sense to partner and collaborate with someone else? And so in my case, I looked at it actually as I never on earth thought that there would be any way that I would do anything other than build a real estate business and expand until a couple of months ago, Adam approached me about being a part of his company and the Herb Group. And what I realized was it's no different than Keller Williams. Keller Williams is the on-ramp to accelerate your business growth and success. You could build your own brokerage. You can walk out and do it. I promise you, as an OP, it's not fun. Like you won't go out and love every minute of building your own brokerage. So it will be way quicker and more effective to plug into the models, the systems, the people, the training, the technology, everything that Keller Williams offers, and to launch further faster. That's what we decided to do with her group, is to say, okay, I think that a platform of leaders will cause us to go further faster. And I'm not the only one who has to be responsible for the success. Now I have business partners. And so I'm thrilled about the idea of finding a who quicker by having a nationwide search to find that person. We went from a team of 7 agents to what we think will be a team of 36 agents pretty quickly, in like a 4-week period of time. That if I could have done that myself, I would have. The reality is it was easier when we partnered with leaders. And so audit yourself. Do you need training or do you need people? And then I think your second question was, if you were a new agent, right? What would I tell myself, tell other people, something to that effect? Does it sound right?
Yes.
Okay. If I'm a new agent and I'm like trying to get going or trying to get off the ground, I think you have to change how you measure your wins. You have to measure smaller wins and celebrate them, because it can be mentally defeating to think that you're not making progress. So look at progress, don't look at results. I know that when I started marketing, I started with Zillow, and I spent $350 a month advertising on Zillow. And that was my car payment at the time. And after 6 months, which would have been around $2,000, I had earned $1,800 in commission, or what sounds to me like a loss. I actually lost money by generating Zillow leads. And then the next month, after my 6-month contract was up, I spent $1,100 a month. That was my mortgage. And I was scared to death because I couldn't afford a second mortgage. But what I knew was that my progress indicated that I was further along towards getting the result I wanted than I was when I started on day one. And so when I looked at my pipeline, I was able to look at like this really big pipeline that just hadn't come out the other side of results. And so I was motivated to keep doing the activity, to keep stacking people in the pipeline. And so if you're new, remember your job is just to go on 1 appointment a day and add that person to your pipeline. That's it. It's really easy. Show up, serve them, talk about real estate, add them to your pipeline. When you do that activity, the results show up.
Totally. Love that. Okay, Eric, I had like 7 more questions, so we're going to have you back for part 2.
Yeah.
I got a lot of value. I know that you guys did too. I know we have 2 training rooms filled with people watching also. So thank you so much for your time. Will you come back and let's do a part 2? Okay, perfect. Okay. Let's do that. Will you guys unmute and tell Eric thank you really quickly and how much we appreciate you?
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
That was great.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric, so much for all the things that you shared. And yeah, we'll have to get you back for part 2.
Let's do it.
All right, sounds good. You guys have a great and wonderful day. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Dana.
Thanks, Eric. See ya.